Hello and Happy New Year, Herstoryans, and welcome to episode 25 of Herstory. And today we are going to be discussing scientist, paleontologist, queen of fossils, Mary Anning. I've had a little bit of a break from Herstory. I think it's been about a month since I last uploaded. So obviously we had Christmas, and then we had New Year, and then I've been at my dad's in Devon for the past 2 weeks, which was lovely. Just take some time, chill out, and write my dissertation proposal for my master's while I was down there. So spent some time with my brother, and I thought, who better to write about when you're down on the south coast of England than the wonderful Mary Anning. So I'd like to dedicate this video firstly to the lovely Hayley, who requested a video on Mary Anning, and secondly to my friend Amy, who I had a marvellous holiday to Lyme Regis with when we were, I don't know, 15, 16, something like that. We just had an absolute whale of a time, and it completely made me fall in love with the place, and I've been back many times since, but it all started from that holiday with my lovely friend Amy. So this one, Hayley and Amy, this one's for you too. So Mary Anning, born the 21st of May in 1799 in Lyme Regis in Dorset. Father Richard was a cabinet maker and carpenter who supplemented his income by mining the coastal cliffside fossil beds near the town and selling his finds to tourists, which is quite a common thing to do, to supplement your income in that way when living in Lyme Regis. Mother Mary Moore, who was known as Molly. The family lived on a house on the town's bridge and attended a dissenter chapel on Coombe Street. They lived so close to the sea that the home actually often flooded a lot during storms, and on one occasion the family had to crawl out of an upstairs window to avoid being drowned. Mary was one of 10 children, but only her and her brother Joseph survived to adulthood. Mary was actually named after her older sister, who died aged 4 when her clothing caught fire and she was so badly burnt she died. So our Mary was born a couple of months later and was named after her sister, who just passed away. On August the 19th, 1800, no, that's not right. 18, this is when Mary, no, ignore me. On August the 19th, 1800, when Mary was 15 months old, I thought it said 15 years old, and I was like, no, that doesn't help. Yeah. August the 19th, 1800, when Mary was 15 months old, she was being held by a neighbour, Elizabeth Haskins, who was standing under an elm tree with 2 other women whilst watching a show by a travelling company of horsemen, when lightning struck the tree and killed all 3 women. Baby Mary was rushed back home and revived in a bath of hot water and made a miraculous recovery. Before this, she'd been quite a sickly baby, but after the incident, she apparently blossomed and flourished and had very good health as a child after that, strangely enough. Mary's education was severely limited. She attended a Congregationalist Sunday school where she learned to read and write, but that was about the extent of her education. So by the late 1700s, Lyme Regis had become a popular seaside resort, and it was, as I say, common for locals to supplement their income by selling curios to visitors, and these would be fossils which were just given like colourful local names like devil's fingers and snake stones, and they were all often sort of attributed like medicinal powers or mythical properties, much like crystals are today. So fossil collecting was a fashionable pastime for the Victorians and the Georgians, and but it wasn't really understood as a science yet. Geology didn't exist, and paleontology certainly did not exist. Most of these fossils were found on the cliffs around Lyme Regis, on what we call the Jurassic Coast. It's a geological formation called the Blue Lias. Lias. I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to pronounce that. Lias. So it's layers of limestone and shale which were laid down during the Jurassic period, hence why it's called the Jurassic Coast. So her father often took Mary and Joseph on fossil hunting expeditions so that they could help him to mine for the fossils, to supplement their meagre family income, which they sold to tourists on a table outside their house. This was a hard time for working class Britons. Mary's childhood, the Napoleonic and French Revolutionary Wars had caused food shortages. The price of wheat trebled, but wages remained unchanged. Sounds a little familiar. Sort of like the recession going on right now. In Dorset, there were many riots over the rising prices of bread, and Mary's dad was actually involved in organising some of those riots. The family's status as dissenters also attracted discrimination, and dissenters were barred from entering several professions by law, as well as not being able to go to university. Mary's father had been suffering with tuberculosis, as well as injuries he sustained from a fall off a cliff while he was collecting fossils. When he died in November of 1810, when Mary was 11, he left the family in a large amount of debt with no savings, and they were forced to apply for parish relief, which is sort of the modern equivalent of what we call benefits in the UK or welfare in the US. It wasn't, the welfare system as we know it wasn't introduced in the UK until after the Second World War. So you would have to go to your parish and kind of plead your case, and they would deem whether it was appropriate for you to receive relief. So it's very kind of touch and go as to whether you would get it. There was no like legal requirement like there is nowadays. So the family continued to collect and sell fossils, and they set up another table of curios at the local inn as well. Their first well-known find was in 1811, when Mary was just 12 years old. Joseph dug up a 4-foot ichthyosaur skull, and a few months later Mary found the rest of the skeleton. Henry Henley, the Lord of the Manor of Colway, paid the family £23 for it, and it went on display in London, where it generated considerable interest. This is at a time when geology and evolution is causing the questioning of the creationist theory. So there's this kind of argument against creationalism and for Darwinism and for evolution, and there's this sort of back and forth that on the one hand the creationists believe that all the species of animal are there and there's no new species to be discovered, and there's no such thing as new species, and there's no such thing as extinction, because that's not part of the creationist theory. Everything as it was supposed to be was created within 7 days. So there's this kind of discord going back and forth, which I'll touch a bit more on later, but yeah, this is a period of a lot of contemplation and back and forth, and so finding a dinosaur skeleton like this of a creature who certainly does not exist, and gives rise to this extinction theory when there was an age where dinosaurs walked the earth. This is a big thing. This is a really big thing, and a lot of people are still very much in the dark. Is it you know, is it a dragon? Is it a crocodile? Is it a this? Is it a that? They're trying to rationalize it and make it some sort of creature that they already know, or some subspecies of a creature that they already know. So yeah, it does a lot for like the Victorian consciousness and rethinking creationalist theory and religion, and yeah, there's a lot of pondering going on, a lot of philosophizing going on. Yes, so in May 1819 it was sold to Charles Koenig at the British Museum as a fossilised crocodile for £45, and it was named the Ichthyosaurus. James was now at this time working as an apprentice upholsterer, and Mary was the one who was mainly running the fossil business. In 1820, after a year of no fines, the family were at the point of having to sell their furniture to pay the rent. Upset at finding this out, one of their keenest customers, the Lieutenant Colonel Thomas James Birch, auctioned off the fossils he'd purchased from them thus far to raise money for their rent, and the auction raised £400, which is around £26,000 today, and raised the family's profile substantially in the geological community, which was a very, very nice thing for him to do. It's not clear how much of that £400 actually went to Mary's family, but it did give them quite a stable income, I think, from that point onwards. Certainly got them out of trouble. So it was, yeah, very nice of him to do that. Very, very friendly, Mr. Thomas James Birch. Very neighbourly thing to do. Mary continued to mine for fossils, although it was really dangerous work. In October of 1833, she narrowly avoided being killed by a landslide that completely buried her, and it killed her black and white terrier, who was her constant companion and went everywhere with her and went on her fossil digs with her. Really sad. On the 10th of October 1823, Mary found the first complete plesiosaurus, and in 1828 the first British example of the flying reptiles we know as pterosaurs, followed by a squalaraja fish, squalaraja fish skeleton in 1829. Despite her limited literacy, Mary wrote papers of her findings and drew really beautiful technical drawings. She also dissected animals such as the cuttlefish so that she could better understand the anatomy of her fossils and how they actually worked. In 1824, Lady Harriet Sylvester described Mary as a wonderful instance of divine favour, that this poor, ignorant girl should be so blessed, for by reading and application she has arrived to that degree of knowledge as to be in the habit of writing and talking with professors and other clever men on the subject, and they all acknowledge that she understands more of the science than anyone else in the kingdom. How very patronising. In 1826, aged 27, Mary managed to raise enough money to buy her own house with a glass front store window, where she would open up a shop called Anning's Fossil Depot. Many geologists and collectors from Europe and America travelled to Lyme Regis, which I will refer to as Lyme from now on, just to go and meet Mary and see Anning's Fossil Depot. Geologist George William Featherstone Hoe, God, what a name, Featherstone Hoe, purchased fossils from her, with which he then went on to open the New York Lyceum of Natural History in 1827. In 1844, King Frederick Augustus II of Saxony visited and purchased an ichthyosaur skeleton for his collection. Hello, King Frederick of Saxony. That must have been crazy, popping the King of Saxony coming to your little shop in Lyme Regis. That must have blown her mind. As a woman, Mary was still very much an outsider in the scientific community. Women were not allowed to vote at this point still. They were not allowed to hold public office. They were not allowed to attend university. The Geological Society of London did not allow female members. I don't think they even allowed them to go and sit in and listen to talks. So it was always the gentlemen geologists who published the scientific descriptions of the specimens that Mary found. And these gentlemen often neglected to mention her name when they were publishing these finds. And quite rightly, Mary got a bit pissed off about this. This happened again when William Buckland, a lecturer on geology at Oxford University, visited Lyme and went fossil hunting with Mary. And it was to him that Mary made the suggestion that the strange conical objects known as bezoar stones were actually the fossilized feces of the ichthyosaurs and the plesiosaurs. And Buckland would then sort of take hold of this idea and go on to name the objects coprolites in what became a really scientifically important discovery. And it was Mary's brainchild, Mary's idea, that Buckland took and passed off as his own, and he took it and he ran with it, and it made him famous. But it was Mary's idea, which is not very fair. In 1835, Mary lost her life savings of £300 in a bad investment. We're not entirely sure what went on, but we think a con man ran off with her money. She then turned to Buckland and said, look, you've taken my idea, you've run with it, what you've done is really unfair. Do you want me to turn around and tell everybody that the thing that made you famous was actually the idea of a woman? And basically she persuaded Buckland, who then went on to talk to the British Association for the Advancement of Science, and they ended up granting her a civil list pension of £25 a year, which was enough to tide her over. Mary finally died aged 47 from breast cancer on the 9th of March 1847. Towards the end of her life, she'd been taking increasingly large amounts of laudanum for the pain that she was in, and the gossips in Lyme spread the rumour that she had a drinking problem, which is really sad. In 1846, upon learning of her cancer diagnosis, the Geological Society raised enough money from its members to help with her living and her medication costs. The council of the newly created Dorset County Museum made her their first honorary member, and she was finally buried on the 15th of March 1847 at St Michael's Church in Lyme Regis. So if you're ever in Lyme Regis, do pop over and go and see her at St Michael's Church. Members of the Geological Society contributed to a stained glass window in her memory, which was unveiled in 1850 in commemoration of her usefulness in furthering the science of geology, as also of her benevolence of heart and integrity of life. That's very sweet. Charles Dickens wrote about her life in February 1865 in his magazine All Year Round, that emphasised the troubles she had faced and overcome in her life. He ended the article with, "The carpenter's daughter has won a name for herself and has deserved to win it." So, fun facts about Mary Anning. So, Mary Anning's discoveries are quite substantial, and there are a lot of little ones. So, I'm just going to tell you the major ones: a full ichthyosaur, plesiosaurus, pterosaur, squalaraja fish. So sorry if I'm upsetting any paleontologists or dinosaur enthusiasts or fish enthusiasts. I always seem to upset someone every week with my pronunciation, so I'm really sorry. And the coprolites, of course, was her brainchild. She figured out that belemnite fossils appeared to have a chamber containing dried ink inside them, kind of like a cuttlefish or a squid. And Anning's discoveries became key pieces of evidence for the extinction of dinosaurs. This is what we were talking about before. Until the 1820s, it was believed that new species couldn't just appear and existing ones couldn't just become extinct, because that would imply that God's creation had been imperfect. These animals must just live in some unexplored region of planet Earth, right? So the find of the plesiosaur, which was unlike any known living creature, disrupted this theory completely. Her finds provided support for a guy called George Cuvier, who had a theory that there had been an age of reptiles, where reptiles rather than mammals were the dominant life form. And her discoveries also played a key role in the development of a new discipline of geohistorical analysis, and in the 1820s, that sought to understand the history of the planet Earth, and by using evidence from fossils to reconstruct extinct organisms and the environments in which they lived, and this science was named paleontology. H.A. Ford wrote The Heroine of Lyme Regis, the story of Mary Anning, the celebrated geologist, in 1925. According to P.J. McCartney in Henry de la Beche's Observation on an Observer from 1978, Mary was the basis of Terry Sullivan's 1908 song and tongue twister, She Sells Seashells. She sells seashells on the seashore. The shells that she sells are seashells, I'm sure, that one. She was also referenced in The French Lieutenant's Woman. Tracy Chevalier wrote the novel Remarkable Creatures, with Mary and her friend Elizabeth Philpott as the main characters, in 2009. And Curiosity by Joan Thomas was also written about Mary in 2010. What else is there? Louis Agassiz named 2 fossil fish species after her in the early 1940s. Acrodus anningae and Belanostomus anningae. After her death, she also had an ostracod, a therapsid reptile, a mollusk, a plesiosaur, and an ichthyosaurus species named after her as well. It's very cool. In March 2010, as part of a celebration of its 350th anniversary, the Royal Society invited a panel of experts to produce a list of the 10 British women who have most influenced the history of science, and Mary was on that list. Rightly so, I think. In December 2018, it was announced that Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan would star in an upcoming film called Ammonite, which is based on Anning's life and legacy, and would possibly introduce a lesbian romance plot set in the 1840s. Not sure how I feel about that. That's due for release in 2020. When geologist Henry de la Beche painted something called Juria Antiqua, the first widely circulated pictorial representation of a scene from a prehistoric life derived from fossil reconstructions, he based it largely upon fossils Mary had found, and he sold prints of it for her benefit and gave her a cut of the money for it. So this is really important. This is like the first image that we have of the life of the dinosaurs, the dinosaur world. Before that, it was thought that kind of dinosaurs and humans had lived side by side at one point. So this is big. Of her exclusion from the Geological Society of London and the lack of credit for her findings in publications, she wrote, "The world has used me so unkindly, and I fear it has made me suspicious of everyone," which is really sad. The only scientific writing of hers that was ever published in her lifetime appeared in the Magazine of Natural History in 1839, and it was an extract from a letter Mary had written to the editor questioning one of his claims about a certain species. And finally, a campaign has been launched by 12-year-old Evie Swire and her mum Anya of Lyme Regis, Dorset, to get Evie's childhood idol Mary the recognition she deserves. And they want a statue erected in her honour. The campaign is called Mary Anning Rocks, and patrons include Sir David Attenborough, Professor Alice Roberts, and of course Tracy Chevalier, who wrote the novel. The filmmakers of Ammonite donated £15,000 towards the campaign, and if you think Mary Anning rocks, you can go and donate money to the cause at www.maryanningrocks.co.uk. So there you go. That is Mary Anning. Very understated life, a very humble life, a very humble beginning. And she probably during her lifetime didn't think that her and her finds amounted to very much, but they did. She was the mother of paleontology, and yeah, the scientific community and the evolutionary theorists and ecologists have a lot to thank her and her finds for. And she was just incredible, putting herself in danger on a daily basis, going and mining for fossils no matter what the weather. Even when the landslide took the life of her little dog, she still carried on going out there, finding her fossils, making a name for herself. And although she wasn't accepted within the scientific community, she wasn't accepted within her peer group, it sounds like she wasn't really even accepted within the town of Lyme if people were spreading rumours about her being a drunk and stuff like that. So for somebody who wasn't accepted to have stood the test of time, all of these publications that had been made in men's names, we know were her finds. It just shows how much the people that really knew her respected her and her opinion and wanted her story to be told, which is really cool. So yeah, that is Mary Anning. As always, please do let me know if there's somebody you would like me to cover on an upcoming episode of Herstory. Please head over to our Facebook page called the Herstory Girls, and I post cool little kind of motivational things and pictures and stories of ladies that I come across, and yeah, all kinds of other content on there. And we do a poll where you can decide who the next episode will be about, so go and get involved on that. Please do hit that subscribe button and give us a like if you liked this video. Thank you very much. Take care guys, and I will see you very soon for another episode of Herstory. Bye.